Imagine a book so powerful, Carl Jung locked it away for decades. A book filled with visions, demons, and conversations with his soul. This isn't fiction. It's the Red Book, the secret journal that shaped modern psychology. Why did Jung say this book held the future of mankind? And why was the world not ready to see it until now? Most people know Carl Jung as the father of analytical psychology, the man who introduced the world to concepts like the shadow self, archetypes, and the collective unconscious. But very few know that behind his revolutionary theories lies a mysterious and deeply personal creation, a book unlike any other in the history of psychology. It is called the Red Book, and for decades it was hidden bound in red leather, filled with intricate paintings, visions, and dialogues with mythic beings. The Red Book is not a textbook. It's not a scientific paper. It's something far more intimate, a map of the human soul. To understand what this book is and why it matters, we have to step back to the year 1913. Carl Jung, once Sigmund Freud's prized successor, had just ended his collaboration with Freud. Their split wasn't just intellectual, it was spiritual. Jung was breaking away from Freud's strictly rational view of the mind and diving into something deeper, darker, and far more mysterious. Shortly after this rupture, Jung began to experience what he called a creative illness. Strange dreams, terrifying visions, vivid encounters with figures that seemed to emerge from some ancient world inside him. He feared he was losing his mind. But instead of resisting these experiences, Jung chose to embrace them. He cleared his schedule. He withdrew from the academic world, and he entered what he called a confrontation with the unconscious. Each day, Jung would descend into this inner world through a technique he later named active imagination, a conscious dialogue with the unconscious mind. He would allow images, voices, and symbols to rise up from his psyche and then record them carefully, lovingly, as if documenting a dream while fully awake. At first, he captured these experiences in black notebooks, but later he began to transfer the most important ones into a large, red leather-bound volume using calligraphy, symbols, and vivid paintings. This was the Red Book, or as Jung titled it in German, Liber Novus, which means the new book. The pages of this journal are breathtaking: swirling mandalas, medieval-style illuminated scripts, portraits of strange beings and gods. But this is not art for art's sake. Each image, each sentence, is the result of a real psychological journey. Jung wasn't just recording fantasies. He was trying to understand the forces that live within every human being. He wrote about descending into the depths of his soul, about meeting a wise old man named Philemon who would become his inner teacher, about encountering a dark feminine figure named Salome who challenged his ideas of purity and control, about battling serpents, walking through deserts, and being torn between the divine and the diabolical. These were not just hallucinations. They were what Jung called archetypal experiences, timeless patterns of the psyche that every person, in every culture, encounters in dreams, myths, and spiritual awakenings. Through these intense inner experiences, Jung discovered a truth that would shape the rest of his work. The psyche is real, not just a product of brain chemistry, not just a metaphor, but a living reality, one with intelligence, mystery, and power. To Jung, the Red Book was both a warning and a guide, a record of what happens when the conscious ego meets the depths of the unconscious. It's terrifying, it's beautiful, and it holds the seeds of transformation. But here's the strange part. For most of his life, Jung kept this book private. He showed it to a few trusted colleagues, but refused to publish it. He feared it would be misunderstood, that people would think he was mad, or worse, that they would dismiss the sacred as delusion. And so the Red Book remained locked away for decades, even after his death. Only in 2009, nearly 50 years later, was it finally released to the world. And when it was, psychologists, philosophers, and spiritual seekers all asked the same question: why did Jung hide this, and what secrets does it contain? This is only the beginning. Carl Jung didn't write the Red Book for fame. He didn't create it to publish, impress, or even educate. He wrote it because his life depended on it. In 1913, Carl Jung, once Freud's closest ally, found himself spiritually unmoored. He had broken away from Freud's strict materialism and atheistic worldview. But in doing so, Jung entered the unknown. He described the period that followed as the most difficult time of my life. It was as if the ground beneath him had vanished. Dreams overwhelmed him. Visions assaulted his waking mind. He feared he was on the verge of a psychotic break, but instead of suppressing these experiences or drugging them away, Jung listened. He paid attention. He believed deeply that the human psyche is intelligent, that the unconscious mind is not just a dumping ground for repressed memories, but a living dimension full of symbols, voices, and guides. Jung called this journey a confrontation with the unconscious. He likened it to descending into the underworld. Not unlike ancient myths, he wasn't reading about the soul, he was living it. He began practicing a technique he later called active imagination. This wasn't daydreaming, it wasn't passive hypnosis, it was deliberate, focused, intense. He would sit quietly, allow an image to arise from his unconscious, and then interact with it. He would speak to the figures, he would walk through the landscapes of his mind, and then he would write down everything that happened, word for word, as if recording a sacred ritual. He once described it like this: "I took the inner images in my soul as the real facts of a life that was yet to be lived." That's key. To Jung, these inner visions weren't fantasy, they were truths, messages, symbols from the collective unconscious. That deep layer of the psyche we all share, Jung began to notice repeating patterns, archetypes, universal themes that appeared in his visions, and later, in the dreams of his patients. He saw that humanity shares a kind of spiritual DNA, a blueprint of symbols that shows up in myths, religions, art, in dreams, regardless of time, place, or culture. And the Red Book became his personal record of that exploration. In it, he didn't just observe these symbols, he lived them. He journeyed through deserts. He conversed with mythic beings like Philemon, his inner guide, a wise old man with wings and glowing eyes. He wrestled with Salome, the dark feminine force that challenged his mind's rigid control. He saw floods, temples, serpents, sacred fires, each one deeply symbolic, each one drawing him deeper into himself. It was terrifying, but it was also illuminating. Jung began to realize that modern society had lost something vital, its connection to soul, to inner life, to meaning. In a world obsessed with science and rationalism, we had amputated the mystical, the symbolic, the sacred. And we were suffering for it. The Red Book then wasn't just therapy, it was prophecy. Jung once wrote, "The years when I pursued the inner images were the most important time of my life. Everything else is to be derived from this." Let that sink in. The man who helped shape modern psychology, the man whose concepts are taught in universities and practiced in therapy rooms around the world, believed his greatest work was this mysterious, handwritten, painted, mystical book that he never published in his lifetime. Why? Because the Red Book wasn't meant to be consumed as information. It was a transformation, a direct confrontation with the unconscious, the place where the divine, the archetypal, and the shadow dwell. And Jung believed every human being must one day make this descent, not just psychologists, not just mystics, all of us, because the only way to truly know yourself is to enter the darkness within. And in that darkness, you just might discover the light. If the Red Book were just a diary, it would have been forgotten. But what Jung recorded in its pages was something far more mysterious. Inside this crimson journal are visions that read like ancient prophecy, conversations with spirits, paintings of gods, monsters, angels, and flames, and layer after layer of archetypal meaning, messages from the soul that speak in symbol, not science. Let's step into the book. Open one of its illuminated pages and you might find yourself face to face with a winged figure. Wise, ancient, calm. This is Philemon, the inner guide who became Jung's spiritual teacher. To Jung, Philemon wasn't a dream. He was a living force, a symbol of higher wisdom that lived deep in the collective unconscious. Jung wrote, "Philemon represented a force which was not myself. He said things I had not consciously thought." That's the first hidden message of the Red Book. The unconscious is not just a place of darkness. It is a source of wisdom. Beneath your ego lives something ancient and holy. But to reach it, you must pass through your own shadows, and that's exactly what Jung did. In the pages of the Red Book, he meets Salome, a blind, seductive feminine figure who embodies temptation, beauty, and the chaos of desire. She dances through his inner world, challenging his rational mind and revealing his fear of the feminine. Jung didn't push her away. He listened, because Salome wasn't just a fantasy, she was a mirror. She revealed parts of himself he had rejected. And this brings us to the second message. Your shadow is not your enemy, it is your teacher. What you repress controls you, but what you face transforms you. Jung faced other symbols too terrifying and divine. A great serpent appears in his vision, coiling around truth and deception. Jung knew the serpent was an ancient archetype present in every culture. It represents knowledge, danger, healing, death, and rebirth. In other pages, he walks through deserts, enters temples, sees blood running through rivers, and stands before a cosmic tree, the tree of life, an image as old as mythology itself. These weren't random fantasies. They were universal stories playing out in his personal psyche, because as Jung discovered, the personal unconscious rests upon a deeper layer, the collective unconscious, and that's the third message. You are not alone in your struggles because your story is part of a universal story. When you dream of falling, you're echoing ancient myths of descent. When you meet a wise old man in your imagination, you're touching the archetype of the mentor. When you feel lost in a forest or drowning in waves, you're not broken. You're awakening the hero inside you. Jung saw himself as one such hero, not because he was perfect, but because he was willing to walk through the fire of inner truth. That's what the Red Book is, a record of psychological alchemy, where fear becomes insight, where pain becomes transformation, where every monster you meet becomes a messenger from the soul. One of the most powerful visions in the book is of Jung standing at the gates of hell, hearing a voice that says, "You still have to descend deeper." That is the heart of Jung's message. You can't reach the soul by avoiding your pain. You can't become whole by staying in the light. You must descend. You must face your madness, your lust, your rage, your grief. Only then will you find the gold within. The Red Book is not a guidebook. It's not a step-by-step method. It's a mirror. It shows you what is already inside you if you're brave enough to look. And that brings us to a simple but terrifying question. What symbols live in your dreams? What voices whisper in your silence? What truth is waiting for you in the depths of your unconscious? It's almost impossible to believe Carl Jung, one of the most influential thinkers of the 20th century, poured his soul into a book that he never published in his lifetime. For over 50 years, the Red Book remained locked away unseen, unread, tucked in a Swiss vault like a forbidden manuscript from a forgotten time. Why? Why would a man who helped shape modern psychology hide his most personal, powerful, and groundbreaking work? To understand that, we have to understand the fear and the faith behind its creation. Let's go back to 1916. By this time, Jung had filled the Red Book with visions, paintings, and revelations. He had gone to the very edge of his sanity and returned with gold. But what he had recorded wasn't just personal reflection, it was mythic, terrifying. It sounded like prophecy or madness. Jung knew the world wasn't ready. He lived in a time when psychology was desperately trying to prove itself as a science. Doctors, analysts, and academics demanded proof data, logic, formulas. But Jung's Red Book was none of that. It spoke in symbols, not statistics. It came from visions, not experiments. It was a mystical journey in a world obsessed with reason, and Jung feared what people would say. "They'll call me a lunatic," he once told a friend. "They won't understand." And he was right. Even today, the Red Book is difficult to explain. Is it art? Is it philosophy? Is it divine revelation? Or is it simply a man recording the chaos within? The truth is, it's all of those, but back then, Jung worried that publishing the book would destroy his reputation, that the medical world would reject him, that he would be labeled not as a pioneer, but as a madman. So he waited, not out of shame, but out of reverence. You see, Jung believed that the contents of the Red Book were not just his personal experiences. He believed they were part of something larger, a psychic wave moving through humanity, and perhaps it wasn't time yet. Jung once said, to the superficial observer, it will appear like madness, but to the one who has experienced the psyche, it is a roadmap. He knew that when people are not prepared, truth can look like insanity, and so he chose silence. He shared pieces of it with a few trusted students, but only in whispers. He used its insights in his work, but never revealed the source. It was only after his death and after years of intense debate within his family and foundation that the book was finally released in 2009, nearly a century after it was written. And when it was published, something incredible happened. Psychologists, artists, mystics, historians all began to see what Jung saw. That this book wasn't just a personal journal, it was a sacred map of the human journey, the descent into the unconscious, the meeting with the shadow, the union of opposites, the death of the ego, the birth of the soul, and perhaps most importantly, it was a warning because Jung believed that if humanity continued to ignore the unconscious, to deny its dark sides, to suppress its spiritual hunger, we would face collapse not just individually, but as a species. He saw the Red Book as a kind of message to the future, and that future is now. So why did Jung keep it hidden? Because some truths are too powerful to release into an unprepared world. Because silence can be more protective than speech. Because wisdom, like a seed, needs the right time to grow. And now that it's here, the question is not, why did he hide it? But rather, are we finally ready to see it? The Red Book is not a self-help guide. It doesn't give you 10 steps to success or quick tips for happiness. It's a mirror, and like all true mirrors, it shows you more than you want to see. But if you are brave enough to look, you may just discover the most powerful force in your life, your true self. Let's be honest. We live in a world that teaches us to look outward, to chase goals, roles, likes, lovers, and labels. We're told to perform, to fit in, to win, to survive. But what Jung discovered in the silence of his soul was that there's an entire unlived life waiting for you on the inside. And the Red Book is an invitation to enter it. Jung's visions weren't about fantasy, they were about integration. Every voice in his unconscious, the guide, the temptress, the demon, the serpent, they all represented parts of himself that had been silenced. And that's the transformation. Not to eliminate these inner voices, but to listen to them, to integrate them. This is what Jung called individuation, the process of becoming whole, not perfect. Whole, think about that. What if your anxiety isn't just a flaw, but a signal from your unconscious? What if your depression isn't just chemical, but a cry from the soul? What if your strange dreams, dark moods, or sudden impulses are messages? Jung believed the unconscious speaks in symbols, not sentences. And if you want to understand yourself, you have to learn the language of the soul. That's where the Red Book comes in. It's not something you read, it's something you feel. Every painting, every line of text, every strange encounter in Jung's inner world, it stirs something inside you. Because the truth is, you have a Red Book too. It just might be unwritten. It lives in your imagination, your fears, your childhood wounds, your secret desires, your dreams, and maybe it's time to open it. Jung once wrote, "Your vision will become clear only when you can look into your own heart. Who looks outside dreams, who looks inside awakens." This is the ultimate message of the Red Book. Awakening is not about escaping the world. It's about descending into your depths and bringing back the light. It's not about becoming someone new. It's about remembering who you were before the world told you who to be. And no one can do that for you. Therapy may guide you. Books may inspire you. But the journey, that's yours alone. And yet, you are not truly alone, because when you begin this inner descent, you step into the same river walked by prophets, mystics, warriors, artists, and Jung himself. You enter the archetypal journey, the hero's descent, the alchemical fire, the sacred confrontation with the soul. So how can the Red Book transform you? Not by reading it, but by living its spirit. By asking yourself, what is my unconscious trying to tell me? What part of myself have I buried in shadow? What inner guide am I not listening to? And perhaps the most important question of all, am I willing to face myself completely? That is where transformation begins. And it doesn't end with insight. It ends with embodiment, with living as someone who has walked through the fire, met their inner demons, and returned not with answers, but with presence, you, whole grounded, awake. That's the gift Jung gave the world, not with a theory, but with a book he was afraid to share. Now the question is, what will you create when you stop being afraid of yourself? Imagine a book so powerful, Carl Jung locked it away for decades. A book filled with visions, demons, and conversations with his soul. This isn't fiction. It's the Red Book, the secret journal that shaped modern psychology. Why did Jung say this book held the future of mankind? And why was the world not ready to see it until now?